I'm going to be representing Pere Sebastion Meurin, who was at one point the only priest in all of Upper Louisiana and the Illinois country. And one man. And it's a very interesting story. We are going to go back in time to 1775, which is actually only a few years before he passed away. But I want you to think of this, do not think of this as a lecture. It has been a long week, and I am much too tired to give a lecture. Even less, it will not be a homily.
Thank you.
Yes. There will be some moments where you may say to yourself, this is starting to sound an awful lot like a homily. But I assure you, it is not. I want you to think of this as a friendly conversation, that you are guests and neighbors who have dropped by, and we are going to have a little conversation about some things that, some of which you may find interesting, some of which you may have to be polite and pretend that you find interesting, because otherwise I will be deeply wounded. But it is, as I say, in the year of our Lord, 1775, we are coming upon the Christmas season, and what I want to talk with you all about is the fact that although Christmas, it is a time when we enjoy each other's company, when we do, of course, celebrate, because the community is people of French descent, for the most part. And you may have noticed, but French people do enjoy celebrating and having a good time together. Now, everything in balance, of course. Everything in balance, of course. But there is some very important aspects to this time of year for the people of French descent who have settled in places like Saint-Geneviève, out towards the mines, Kaskasky, the Prairie de Rocher, which is where I am now compelled to reside. I did live in St. Genevieve for a while and looked after the church here, but some things happened, and actually quite a few things have happened. I don't know. I do not look like a Jesuit, among other things, because I am not allowed to wear full Jesuit garb anymore. But I actually started as a Jesuit. And most of the priests in this area were Jesuits. There are about 6 of us covering all of Upper Louisiana and the Illinois country. There was one Recollect, but he was not in good health. And particularly after the big war ended, the 7 Years' War, as it is sometimes called, well, you know, who got the Illinois country? Great Britain, precisely. And this poor gentleman, he simply went into hiding. Now, here's the other thing that happened. I had been here about 10 years as one of the Jesuits, of one of 6 Jesuits, and right about the time that the war was ending, and it hadn't become known yet that the British, they took the Illinois country, they took Canada, but they did not take this side of the river. That goes to Spain. But before that happened, we received unexpected word that the Jesuits were being removed from French territory and all French colonies. So we talked, well, do we have to do this? Well, we did not have much choice. And we went to New Orleans, and we were to be put on a ship at first available opportunity. And Pere, who had been here the longest, he was our leader. He was our guide. And Pere said, I will talk to the Superior Council. And he wrote some wonderful arguments. And it was interesting, he wrote these arguments from the perspective of historical figures. And they were just absolutely brilliant, and they never gave him a chance to present these arguments. And this is right at the end of 1763. And right before the decision was finalized and Pere could not say anything to anyone, I was sitting in what was a jail cell, and I thought, I have to find a compromise. I don't want to go back to Paris. Now, some will tell you, you felt this strong connection to the French people of the region. Well, yes. But I knew they were going to be all right. Because remember, there were only 6 of us to start with. So much of the time at the different churches throughout the Illinois country and through upper Louisiana, there wasn't a priest present. So the services would be led by the readers, the lay readers. And other times, someone died, the funeral would be done by the sacristan. They were very committed to their Catholic faith, and actually they still are, which is good because there are even fewer of us now. Anyway, yes, I was concerned about the people of French descent, but even more so, well, it was the native folk who had begun to follow us, who had heard our word, especially, well, I and one other priest, we worked a great deal with the Kaskaskia. And almost all of the Kaskaskia people had converted and become Catholics. And when it was announced, you have to leave, well, they came to us and said, why must you go? Why can't you stay? Why can you not stay? Because if you go, who will look after us and our well-being as believers? Excuse me. How could I leave? How could I leave them? So I said to the Superior Council, what must I do to be able to stay, to go back up, to look after this flock? And, well, you have to stop being a Jesuit. You can't be a Jesuit anymore. sometimes one thing is more important than the other. And I decided it was more important to look after those people than to remain among the Jesuits. And of course, it all worked out because ultimately they disbanded the Jesuits. They suppressed the order. And although it's interesting, there are still Jesuits in America and in Prussia and in Russia and a few other places where, well, like the, Frederick, the king of the Prussians, Jesuits, they're well educated. We can use them as teachers. But they're Jesuits, they're Catholic. No, he was a Protestant. This doesn't matter. Good teachers. So, it was, oddly enough, in the most Catholic of countries that the Jesuits were disbanded. So, I agreed to be counted among the Capuchin, the order of the Capuchins who predominated down in lower Louisiana. And they said, you can't wear Jesuit garb anymore. This is still made for one. But I came back up, and people were glad to see me. But as I said, for several years, I was literally the only priest. People said, well, how did that make you feel? It made me feel very tired. I had to travel around a great deal because even though I saw my primary responsibility to those native folk who had converted, particularly the Kaskaskia, I still, of course, also saw great responsibility among the people of French descent, people in Pere de Rocher and Cahokia, and out in the mines, and at St. Genevieve, and Kaskaskia, and even as far as Vincennes. So I had to do a lot of traveling, and I got very tired. I will tell you, I will be honest with you, it was wearing me out. And I kept asking the officials in New Orleans, can we please, I wrote some very moving letters. Rather proud of how they turned out. And then, of course, no one paid any attention to it, and asked for more priests, and no, don't have anyone, sorry. So I got in touch with the church authorities in Quebec. And a few years after I had started all this process, they did send a gentleman, Pere Gibault. And Gibault was assigned to Vincennes, which was good because then I could concentrate my efforts here along the Great River. The only problem was, of course, this side of upper Louisiana, the French couldn't take care of it anymore. They didn't, the French king couldn't afford it. And so he was cousins with the King of Spain, Carlos III, very interesting man and no friend of the Jesuits, by the way. But he said, I feel really you were our allies in the Great War. You lost Florida. I felt really bad about that. At least I imagined this as they're cousins. Would have talked perhaps like this. And so Louis, he says to his cousin, King Carlos, he says, how would you like all of the Louisiana territory, from New Orleans all the way up to the great grasslands? All right, we'll take it. So the Spanish, they took it because what they wanted to do was to make a barrier to protect what they really cared about, which was, of course, Texas, New Mexico, the silver mine, Mexico, because those greedy English fellows are just on the other side of the river. This makes a border area that will help keep them out. By the way, I do not wish to seem judgmental, but les Anglais, they can be rather narrow-minded, especially when it comes to Catholics. And you know what? Irony. Life is not, if nothing else, a festival of irony. You know, the Irish Catholics, at the heart of their empire, and they treat them very badly, and they have very few rights. The Catholics up in Quebec have more rights than the Irish Catholics do. And believe me, the Irish Catholics have noted this, and they are not pleased about it. But you know, it's like the thing about, you talk to one of the British or one of their colonists, more often than not, the way they look at the world, they look at French, oh, French, ugh, they're so lazy. Those people in places like, what is it, that little rat hole, Saint-Geneviève. Oh, they work 3 days and then they're drunk the rest of the week. And that kind of thing. They think of these people who came here as people filled with hope, looking for opportunities to make their lives better for themselves and their children. These very entrepreneurial, hard-working people, and they think they are lazy. Well, let me tell you, the people here, they most certainly are not lazy. They are, yes, they are people who enjoy to socialize, to have fun. They are also people who are of great faith, and their Catholic beliefs and their Catholic church is important to them. Because, well, as I said, you can see this. There's no one priest, one wretched priest wandering around between all these, over hundreds of miles between all these different villages, and when he is not there, do they stop being good Catholics? No, the readers do the services, the sacristan does the burials. When I come to them, there is confession, there is communion. The marriages, we have sort of worked things out that a young couple, they like each other, they start to like each other a lot. Well, you sort of, you can start living together, and it's not really living in sin, you're just waiting for the priest to show up. So, their faith is important to them, but let's face it, they're practical people. They make things work. Why is it important? Why is his faith important? Well, for one thing, it is how they live their lives as part of communities. You don't have, it is not like Les Anglais, where you have the people, yes, there are a few settlements, but most people, when they go settle in Pennsylvania or Virginia or they spread out. They have the little homesteads out in the country, and they farm. It's not like here, where you have the community, and then there are the common fields around the town or the village, and you go out and you farm in those fields. You work together, you help each other. Community is essential to these people and their way of life. And the heart of community that pulls them together, even when They don't always agree on things. And sometimes, a small town. How many of you live in a small town? Yes, all right. What is it like? Well, when I was a young seminarian, one of the old Jesuit fathers, some of the other young men, he asked us, mon Pere, what is the most important of the things that our Savior called upon us to do? He'd say, well, it is that you must love one another. You must love your neighbor. You must love all of your people you interact with as if they were family with you. And the young man said, well, but that's very hard sometimes, yes? He said, oh yes, well, but Jesus, he didn't say you have to like the son of a bitch, you just have to love him. It's a useful distinction, no? The small towns, villages, sometimes it is like a family, and families do not always get along, eh? Well, what pulls them together, even when they don't agree, when they, these people, they love to sue each other. They're always going to court over something or other, and, but still, their faith, the church, what they share as Catholics, binds them together as a community that helps one another, that works together, that ultimately, although not always perfectly, but ultimately will function. The Catholic faith is that glue that holds it, along with, of course, the French language. Of course, and I would have said 10 years ago, I would have said, oh, and it is their love for the king. Well, we have a different king now. There's a Spanish king. But there are the language, the faith that still bind people together. So at the holidays, at Christmas, yes, it is to celebrate important elements of our faith. It is to have a good time. I mean, the holidays, parties and dancing and making music and entertaining, playing games, all those things that are a useful interruption of the hard work the rest of the time. This is the glue that pulls these communities together and makes them communities. So faith and the hope that goes with it, because what are the three primary virtues? Faith, charity, and hope. These people came here because of hope. Hope for a better life, as I said, for themselves and their children. But it is not always perfect. This happens. But it is nowhere near as bad as Les Anglais say. It is no. Every now and then, yes, there are some who, we are all sinners, but God has given us free will. We are not like, and actually, that's what happened in France. It's a long story. The Jansenists and predestination and blah, 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 blah. I'm not even going to go there. But with our free will, we can choose to be good. We can choose to correct our mistakes. And that is very essential. Because we do make mistakes. What? Anyone here who has not made a mistake in their life? You were about to put up your hand. That's all right. I can work with you on that. But for them to say these people are lazy and they are drunkards and they are superstitious and foolish, nothing could be farther than the truth. You know, it's interesting. They, you know, as I said, one of my most important parts of my mission to me are the native folk. And not just the ones who have converted, like the Kaskaskia, but also there are tribes that have not converted, but we have a very interesting relationship with them, and we have an ongoing conversation, especially in, I still think like a Jesuit, I'm afraid. But these people, they have great wisdom. They have intriguing ideas. Before the suppression, the Jesuits, we would go and meet with the great Osage, the largest tribe in the region. We would go and meet with them and talk with their holy wise men. And I noticed right away when we did this that the older Jesuits, like Pere, he would sit and listen. He didn't argue with them. He didn't, well, I don't know. He listened. And then when he wanted to talk, in turn, they listened to him. Very interesting process. But here you have these wise people. Here you have these people who have this deep connection to creation itself. And they are almost as lazy as the Frenchmen. No, they are even lazier than the Frenchmen. Or they have no morals. The men are so lazy, they go hunt and go to war. They make the women do all the farming. They simply do not understand, and they do not take the trouble to understand. Do you know why well, let us take the Osage as an example. Do you know why the Osage, the men, don't do any farming? Anyone? Have you?
Do they do the hunting and fishing?
They do the hunting and fishing. The women, they are the farmers. They also own all the property. So they are the business people in their families, which is also why, should you decide you wanted to go into the, oh, you're already married, aren't you? That's all right. No, pay no attention to this then. All right. But let's say that you wanted, a Frenchman wanted to go into the fur trade. Well, what do? You marry an Osage lady because you are marrying well, yes, they are the business people. They also are very tall and handsome. But I'm sure that has nothing to do with it. But they handle the business. You become part of their family business network. And you can trade with other tribes out on the great grasslands, the Pawnee and Arikara and the Dakota, and which if you are just some random Frenchman, no, they will not let you do that. But you marry an Osage lady, then you are part of a set of relationships that you can do that. And the Osage women are very good business people. They are also good farmers. We learned a lot about the farming and herbs and all the things that grow in the earth because, if you will permit me, a little bit about the Osage and their cosmology. They believe in a great spirit, Wakonta. Wakonta made everything, and he is out beyond the world that we exist in, and they are sometimes, they can be a little vague about, is it a he, is it a she? Well, no, it is neither. It is Wakanta, it is the Great Spirit, it is the Creator. Does this sound familiar at all? Yes, they have a sense of God the Father. Then there are two beings who were created by Wakanta, the first man and the first woman. And the first man is not unlike Adam in our way of understanding, but also the first woman. She is known as, to them, old woman who never dies. An old woman who never dies is the mother of all people. Again, sound familiar? She is not unlike the Blessed Virgin, except she is not a virgin, but old woman who never dies, the earth is her body. For a man to dig in the body of old woman who never dies, it would be sacrilege. It would be disrespectful. A man among the Osage, he can't be a farmer. He can't help with agriculture because it would be disrespectful to the Earth Mother. Now is this starting to make sense? He is not lazy. He goes, he hunts, he defends the village, he defends his people, he fishes, he does all these other things that he can take living things from the surface of old woman who never dies body, but he cannot dig into it. He cannot violate her. We understand this because, like I said, Pere what's man, and my colleagues would sit and we talk to them, and we listen to them. Les Anglais are not so good at sitting and listening sometimes. But another thing about them, they will tell you, just like us, you can choose, you have free will. You can choose to be a good person, or you can choose to do bad things. And if you do bad things, if you make that choice, it is starting to sound like a homily, isn't it? I'm sorry. Old habits die hard, yes? If you choose to do bad things, then you will never get to walk. It is their way of expressing it. You will never get to walk the Milky Way. They go to heaven. They believe in a heaven. They also, yes, and they do believe in a hell. And they just express it differently. This is one of the reasons why the Jesuits, one of the things that the Jesuits always tried to be very respectful of native peoples, to the extent that particularly in South America, and they even did this some up in Canada on a small scale, they made what they called reductions for certain peoples, where a native group would be settled as a community, and they would be looked after and protected by the Jesuits. And we were actually discussing the possibility of doing this for the Great Osage, to create a reduction for them. a community where we could interact with them, they would be protected from the greed of the Europeans, and they could live their lives and learn step by step how their cosmology could fit in with ours, and they could become brothers with us in our beliefs. Well, it didn't happen for a number of reasons, not the least of which was, of course, that the Jesuits were suppressed. As I say, initially, late 1760s, they are all gone from the French territories. The early 1770s, they were already gone, of course, from what had become here, Spanish territory, but other Spanish territories, they are expelled from there, from the Kingdom of Naples, from all these other Catholic communities, Catholic nations. The Jesuits are, well, I will be honest, perhaps we became too enamored of the things of this world, political power, influence, even money. The whole problem with France started over Martinique, where the Jesuits there, they had sugar plantations, and they were making quite a bit of money. And then when the Great War started, the British captured the fleet that had a large shipment of their products. And they lost, I think, 20,000 livres. It was a lot of money. And they couldn't pay it back. But you know what, I think that was an excuse. I think as much as anything, it was that you have the secular powers, the kings of these different places, they are feeling a lot of pressure. You know, you find when people are making life difficult for you, it frequently is a useful thing to find someone else to blame. I'm sure none of you here would do anything like that. No, of course not. But I am afraid that's what our King Louis did. And his government. And they blamed the Jesuits for a great many. They accused us of many terrible things that did not happen. Oh, they're not taking care of their missions. They're wielding too much political power. Well, maybe a little bit of that, yes. But, you know, here's the ironic thing. One of the reasons they did not like the Jesuits was because we were too close to the Pope. And the kings, like the King of Spain, the King of France, they wanted to reduce the power of the Pope and increase their own power. The Jesuits were allies of the Pope. Well, we'll take care of that. And they did. So, again, I wish to say that the important thing about understanding these communities, whether it is the communities like Saint Genevieve and the people of French descent, or the Kaskaskia, or the Osage, or other groups of native folk, we must listen to each other. We must try to understand each other. And not simply make assumptions, and not try to be judges. Maybe that would even help us in our everyday life, in these little villages where people can't get along, or they get angry about something that my grandfather, he was grievously harmed by your grandfather. Oh, what did he do? I do not remember, but I'm still very angry about it. Does that sound familiar? Yes. We must try to understand one another and be kind to each other. And I call upon you to embrace the Christmas season. And in balance, please don't get carried away. But in balance, enjoy each other's company. Sing, dance, have a drink or two, or three. Some good food. I know that Mr. Bolduc, you know what he will be doing? He will be roasting some pigs. And he has quite a few very nice, large domestic pigs. And he likes to roast them whole and invite everyone in the community. And it's, you know, you can, when you are enjoying a good glass of wine and a big plate of roast pig, well, you can forgive the neighbor who maybe you didn't agree with on something, and you can simply enjoy each other's company. So, I respectfully ask that you do like these people do, enjoy each other's company, forgive each other. And there's plenty of time after Christmas to take each other to court. But I wish you all the best for this season. Merci.
Thank you.
If any of you have questions for Pere Meurin, I would be happy to try to answer them for you. They don't ask me names and dates. I'm very bad with names and dates. But I will try. But
Okay, it's grim, but how did your life end?
well, he really, he essentially was worked to death.
Oh, really?
He was only about 67 when he died. Here's the interesting thing. After a few years of working and being back in St. Genevieve and Kaskaskia, they said because he had gotten a connection established with the church authorities in Quebec, which is under British rule at that point, the authorities, French and Spanish, said, well, you are now affiliated with an enemy of us. You are not allowed to be on the other side of the river. You have to go over and stay at Pere de Rocher. And so I did. That is where I am actually established, is Pere de Rocher, and the latter part of things. But he still went over to the western side of the river. He still visited Saint Louis and Saint Genevieve and the mines and all those places. He worked himself to death. In 1777, he just was very tired, was very sick, and he died. And other than that, I can't say. Nothing like, you know, he was run over by a runaway wagon or something like that. No, nothing that dramatic. He was just very old, tired, and sad.
Thank you.
So earlier when you talked about the Jesuits all being disbanded except for a few communities,
Mhm.
not well,
Nations,
nations.
yes.
How did those hold so tight that they retained?
They weren't officially Jesuits. In 1770, I just told you not to ask me for dates. But in the 1770s, the Pope finally actually disbanded the Jesuits, and Jesuits in places like Prussia and Russia and the US, they just kind of sort of ignored it and didn't really call themselves Jesuits. And also they were living in places where generally the authority of the Pope was not taken terribly seriously.
Were they wearing the garb, the priest outfit?
Well, that is a good question. And in some cases, they wore some form of clerical garb. But to a great extent, particularly in Prussia and Russia, they dressed as a scholar would, which in many ways in the 18th century is not all that different from how a cleric would dress. But, you know, there are very specific things about Jesuit dress, like not having any buttons, and which I'm not sure was all that wonderful of an idea. But I think buttons are actually a fine invention. But, yeah, that is a really intriguing question, but that is my somewhat limited understanding that some places, particularly on the east coast of America, they would have dressed still in sort of a clerical fashion, but other places not so much. And of course, they, you know, the order gets the Society of Jesus is reestablished in the early 19th century. And, but I think they had learned some lessons by then. Like, don't have sugar plantations and put all your sugar on a couple of ships, just as a big war is starting.
What did the Jesuit outfit look like?
Usually a long cassock, sometimes with the split collar like this, but very simple. And like I said, their basic cassock did not have buttons. It was tied shut with a sash.
The priest at St. Genevieve at our church here, is he Jesuit? Because he wears that long cassock.
Okay,
And he wears the hat like you have. So did the Jesuits still dress like that?
well, remember, when there is a priest at St. Genevieve, for some of the time it's me. And, but later on, there are more priests who come here in the late 1770s and into the 1780s. You know, there are multiple different orders,
And they all had to dress similar.
and generally speaking, they wear a cassock of some
You see
form.
these old pictures that people have drawn, and the priest always looks like they have that.
Yes, yes, but you also see, and particularly in France, where clerics wear something much more like this, you know, basically a sleeved waistcoat with some form of cassock over that. This type of collar that most people associate with Anglicans, actually.
Yeah.
But yes, French priests were wearing these, and but also one of the other things, very often those illustrations are not done in the same period they are meant to represent, or by someone who, and they kind of tend to make assumptions. You know, but again, let's not be judgmental. Everyone does the best they can, and sometimes what is expressed is more important as the idea than the details of reality. Very well.
Very interesting.
You?
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed this. I did, certainly. I invite you all to, if you haven't seen our museum or taken the tours of the historic Bolduc House, which is probably, even though it's a little late, you know, it's late 1780s, early 1790s, it gives you a really good idea of what a well-to-do French merchant or French descended merchant, what their life was like, what their house was like. And we sell the tickets for the guided tours and to see the museum upstairs, and go up and go out around the front door. But, and let's see, other things that we have happening. How many of you are familiar with La Guillonnée? Ah,
Oh, the guillotine.
oh, talk about tradition and the importance of tradition. For hundreds of years, the people in St. Genevieve on New Year's Eve have La Guillonnée, where you have a group of mummers, and this is a tradition that comes from Europe, to medieval times, where on special occasions, group of mummers, young men from the village dressed as beggars or other strange characters, would come around and have a fiddler and sing a song. And like here on New Year's Eve, it is these fellows come to your, and no, actually there's some women in the group too, but they come and they have a fiddler and a lead singer and they sing this absolutely ridiculous song about, oh, we're going to make soup and we need a 10-foot long sausage. If you don't have a 10-foot long sausage, well, we'll just give us a drink or let us dance with the prettiest girl in the house. And they do this stomping circular peasant dance around the lead singer and the fiddlers. And it's fascinating. They've been doing this for literally the hundreds of years. And we will have La Guillonnée happening in St. Genevieve on New Year's Eve from 6 to 8 p.m. We're partnering with the Park Service people. We're gonna close off part of Market Street because we have to have people outside. And Dennis Stromat, the gentleman who's preserved and saved a lot of Creole culture for this region, the dialect, the music. Dennis is going to be playing. We're going to have sandwiches and soup, and we're working on drinks right now. And then at around 8 o'clock or so in the evening, the troupe comes. They will have visited other places. We'll be hosting them down on the street. They'll actually dance in the street, singing this song, and it's just delightful. And the best part is everything's done, and you get to go home by 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And you are well. I know. Yeah, talking like
It's really cool.
yeah.
You have to.
It
Don't
is
miss it. It's just so
really
fun.
intriguing.
Yeah.
And it just gives you a sense of this whole thing of, yeah, I can see how some stuffy English guy would look and go, oh, well, that's quite inappropriate. And yes, a fair amount of drinking is involved. And they're all, and goodness knows they're having a wonderful time, which no one is supposed to have a good time. Well, that'll get you straight to hell, having a good time. But it's intriguing because it's a reflection of the importance of tradition, of the identity as Creole, French, and how it has shaped the strength and identity of this community for a very long time and sustained it through a lot of change and a lot of social and economic evolution. So if you have a chance to come see us, we offer that. We'd be glad to have you. And I just very much appreciate this lovely audience and your questions and you laughing in the right places. That's always encouraging, rather than when the audience laughs in the wrong place. But, by the way, this is Tandy Thompson. Tandy is the president of our board of French Colonial America, and she is the leader of the team that looks after this building and Bolduc House and,
I'm
and
the
if you-
one that gets to say, please donate.
Yeah. So,
Right, well, it's an important mission.
It's a very important
Yes,
issue.
Yeah.
We're very fortunate to have some very prominent people on our board.
Yes.
Many of you have heard the name Peter Raven.
Oh, yeah.
Love that.
Peter's on our board. Many of you have heard the name Blanche Toohill.
Yeah,
Blanche is on our board.
very nice.
Many of you have heard the name Fran Levine. Fran's on our board. So we're very fortunate to have some very prominent people here. And they're really here primarily because they believe in what we're doing and recognize that St. Genevieve and what we're doing down here is tantamount.
Yes.
That it's very important to be saved, it's very important to continue, and that the partnership that we have developed with the National Park is critical to both entities doing better. Synergy, as he's been saying, we do better when we work together. So that's what we're really achieving here, and we want to continue to do that. We can do things they cannot.
and they can
And
do
we can-
things we can't.
And we can do things,
Right.
you know, better, they can do things we can't, we can do things they can't. So it works out really well.
It's very complimentary.
Very complimentary.
They're-
And they're, you know, so I think ultimately the town will continue to thrive,
Good.
which is why the decision was made for French colonial America to take the plurality of the National Society of the Colonial Dames of America and the State of Missouri's properties. The Dames are still involved. The Dames continue to own the artifacts in the houses. I encourage you to do, as he said, if you've not been in them recently, I encourage you to go back. It is not a vaccination. One visit is not enough. Every
It keeps
time-
evolving.
They keep evolving, we keep changing things ever so slightly as we learn things. So one of the things that we did when we took over running the site was we changed how the houses were decorated to better reflect the probate from Louis Bolduc's estate. So as you may know, sometimes when they went in and did probates, they'd go, oh, chair, well, let's see, there are about 25, 30, 40 chairs here, and table, and oh yeah, there's another chair. So, or they'd go through and go, chair, oh, look, table. And so, fortunately, when they did Louis, they did the latter. So we kind of knew where stuff was in the house.
They made a map, essentially.
Yeah.
And,
And it allowed us to redecorate the house. The houses have some really cool, very unique pieces in them. And realize that when you go in there, everything that's there is authentic to the period. There are no reproductions in those houses. Not a one. So that's really quite an achievement. The Dames went around in the 40s and 50s purchasing things at a good price as one could back then. And they made a heck of a collection.
And who were the Dames again?
The National Society of the Colonial Dames of America and the State of Missouri.
Goodness.
So that is an
Who were
award.
they? I mean, who were they as individuals, as human beings? Like women that just had
The current
interests?
president is a lady by the name of Christy James, who just happens to be my first cousin,
and it's also on our board.
and is also on our board.
Were they historians, though? I mean, what was their affiliation with wanting to keep it, accumulate goods? Like, what was their passion?
Their passion was that they discovered the Bolduc house was about to be torn down.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Okay.
So,
Thank you very much.
in the 1940s, they realized that here's a house that's about to